News breaking overnight. If you are just waking up, listen to this. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that the first Russian-produced vaccine for COVID-19 has received regulatory approval from the country's health ministry. The vaccine was developed by Moscow's Gamaleya Institute. Putin said it forms stable immunity and passes all necessary safety checks. Putin also said one of his daughters has actually received that vaccine. Joining us right now on the phone to talk more about this is Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He's former FDA commissioner and now a CNBC contributor. He's also on the boards of Pfizer and Illumina. And Dr. Gottlieb, what do you think of this news? We've been trying to figure out what it means and potentially where we go from here.
Well, I wouldn't take it, certainly not outside a clinical trial right now. It appears that it's only been tested in several hundred patients at most. There's some reports that it's been in as few as 100 patients. It's a adenoviral vector vaccine, so it's based on a viral vector that's being used to deliver the gene sequence that codes for the epitope, in this case the spike protein, that you want to elicit immunity against. So it's not a trivial vaccine in terms of the technical complexity that goes into manufacturing a vaccine like this. If you remember, the Chinese were also developing an adenoviral vector vaccine by a company called CanSino that's in clinical trials in Canada. And the early data on that vaccine isn't very encouraging. A lot of people had antibodies to the viral vector itself, and so they effectively neutralized the viral vector because it was based on a common cold, the virus that was being used to deliver the gene sequence in this case. And it's not clear how efficacious the Russian vaccine is going to be and whether or not people have some prior immunity to the adenovirus that they're using to deliver the coronavirus gene sequence.
When you say you wouldn't take it, is that because you worry about its safety or its efficacy?
Well, both at this point. Something that's only been tested in several hundred patients, that's effectively a phase 1 clinical trial, and so you wouldn't want to take that outside a clinical trial where you're being closely monitored. In a lot of these situations, you might only get one shot at taking a vaccine within a season. So if you put a vaccine on the market that's not efficacious, it's going to be hard to revaccinate the population. So you want to make sure it works. And you also want to make sure it's safe. This isn't a trivial technological platform that they're using to manufacture this vaccine. It's not a protein-based vaccine where they're just injecting some segment of the spike protein. They're using a viral vector to deliver that epitope. And so that's technically complex. And so there's more things that can go wrong from a safety standpoint, including that you can get a reaction to the viral vector itself.
Dr. Gottlieb, it's Brian Sullivan. They started the trials on this drug actually back in mid-June, and by mid-July they said they hope to have a working vaccine by mid-August, which is basically where we are. So they have been working on this and testing it on humans for 2 months. Is that enough time to come to any conclusion?
I think in terms of their development right now, they're a little bit behind where we are with the vaccines that we have in development. Our vaccines here in the U.S. are in phase 3 clinical trials. They're getting dosed in thousands of patients as we speak. They've cleared phase 1, phase 2 studies. They've been tested in 100 and in some cases a couple of hundred patients. That's about where Russia is right now. They've cleared the equivalent really of a phase 1 clinical trial in terms of putting it in 100 to maybe as many as 300 patients. So it needs to be evaluated in a large-scale clinical trial. Now, what it means for them to give some kind of preliminary approval to start vaccinating people outside of a clinical trial is unclear to me. They might be trying to do this as some kind of registry. They talked about getting volunteers to take the vaccine outside of a clinical trial. So that might be some kind of registry that they're setting up where they're going to continue to follow these patients. It's not really cleared for general use in the market. So there might be a little bit of semantics going on in terms of how they're treating this from a regulatory standpoint. So they're claiming that it's fully approved, but it's not really fully approved. But they're certainly not ahead of us, and we certainly wouldn't allow a vaccine to be used for mass distribution at this point based on the data that we have in hand. We just don't know that the vaccines are safe and effective at this point.